The wind howled like a banshee outside the ranger station, rattling the windows and sending shivers down my spine despite the crackling fire in the hearth. I pulled my wool blanket tighter, seeking comfort in the worn leather of my favorite armchair. Boredom gnawed at me. Winter in the Blackwood National Park was a lonely affair, especially for a city boy transplanted to the wilderness. Reaching for the kerosene lamp, I flicked it on, casting dancing shadows on the wood-paneled walls. My gaze fell on the shelf above the fireplace, where a collection of old ranger logs resided. With a sigh, I decided to delve into the past for some entertainment. Pulling out a weathered leather-bound volume, I cracked it open. The faded ink revealed the spidery handwriting of Ranger Davies, stationed at Blackwood decades ago. The early entries were mundane animal sightings, trail maintenance, weather observations. But then, on a page dated late November, the tone shifted. "Strange sounds tonight," Davies scrawled. "Like mournful howls echoing through the trees. Never heard anything like it in all my years here." The following entries became increasingly frantic. Mentions of large, unseen creatures leaving unnatural tracks in the snow. Disappearances of hikers, their cabins ransacked but no trace of a struggle. A chilling description of a monstrous figure glimpsed through the frosted window, skeletal, gaunt, with eyes that glowed an unnatural yellow. "Wendigo," Davies wrote in a shaky hand. "The old tales are true. It's here. Pray God it doesn't find me." The final entry was just a single, desperate sentence, "Gone for supplies. Don't come looking." A cold sweat prickled my skin. Ranger Davies had vanished without a trace. Was it the Wendigo? Was there any truth to the local legends? A sudden crash from outside shattered the silence. My heart hammered against my ribs as I grabbed the hunting rifle hanging by the door. Cautiously, I crept towards the window, peering out into the swirling snow. The wind seemed to whisper something, a guttural sound that sent goosebumps erupting across my flesh. Just then, a hulking figure emerged from the blizzard. Tall and emaciated, it moved with an unnatural grace, its eyes burning with an eerie phosphorescence. The Wendigo. It let out a blood-curdling howl, the sound echoing through the night. Fear paralyzed me, but instinct took over. I raised the rifle, my hand shaking violently. Aiming for the glowing eyes, I fired. The shot echoed through the woods, followed by a deafening silence. Then, a blood-curdling scream ripped through the air. Cautiously, I cracked open the window. There, lying sprawled in the snow, was a mangled figure. But it wasn't the Wendigo. It was the weathered face of Ranger Davies, twisted in a mask of terror. His clothes were tattered, and a single set of enormous tracks stretched away from him, leading deeper into the nightmarish depths of the forest. The wind howled like a banshee, carrying with it the chilling laughter of a creature both monstrous and strangely familiar. I slammed the window shut, the image of Ranger Davies' lifeless eyes seared into my memory. The logbook lay open on the table, a stark reminder of the horrors that lurked in the frozen wilderness. Sleep was a distant dream that night. The park may have belonged to the Rangers by day, but by night it belonged to the Wendigo. A biting wind whipped across the mountain peak, swirling snowflakes in a dizzying dance. Laughter momentarily pierced the howling Arctic symphony as four friends, Sarah, Ben, Emily, and Matt, high-fived at the bottom of a particularly exhilarating run. Their annual ski trip to the remote White Peak Mountain Lodge was in full swing, a tradition they'd cherished since college. This year, however, an unsettling quiet hung heavy in the air. The lodge, usually bustling with fellow adventurers, stood eerily empty. The staff, a normally jovial bunch, seemed tight-lipped and nervous. Rumors swirled amongst the locals about strange happenings deeper in the surrounding Whisperwood forest, rumors of a monstrous creature with an insatiable hunger for human flesh, a creature whispered to be the legendary Wendigo. Sarah, the ever-skeptical one, scoffed at the tales. Ben, the thrill-seeker, saw it as an exciting challenge. Emily, wary of the unknown, remained cautiously optimistic. Matt, prone to anxiety, found himself haunted by the chilling legends. Ignoring the warnings of the Lone Lodge staff member, a wizened old man named Silas, the friends set out for a daring off-piste adventure deeper into the woods. The snow grew thicker, sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy, and an unnerving stillness settled around them. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the trees. Ben, leading the group, stumbled and fell through a hidden gap in the snow, disappearing into a dark chasm below. Panic surged through the group. Sarah, the most level-headed, secured a rope around a sturdy tree and rappelled down after Ben. The sight that greeted her was horrifying. Ben lay groaning, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle, pinned beneath a heavy branch. Beneath him, in the dimly lit cavern, lay a set of colossal tracks unlike any animal Sarah had ever seen. A low, guttural growl resonated through the chamber, sending shivers down her spine. Climbing back up with Ben, they relayed the terrifying discovery to Emily and Matt. Fear became a tangible presence in the frigid air. As dusk approached, casting long, twisted shadows, they knew the lodge was miles away. Desperate for shelter, they stumbled upon an abandoned trapper's cabin. Inside, they found meager supplies, some dried food, a single oil lamp, and a few thin blankets. The cabin was far from ideal, but it was their only hope for survival. As night fell, the wind howled with renewed ferocity, carrying with it an unsettling symphony of unearthly howls and guttural shrieks. Huddled together for warmth, they kept the flickering lamp lit, casting grotesque shadows on the weathered walls. Hours bled into an agonizing eternity. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, but the fear of venturing outside was far greater. Suddenly, a deafening thump resonated on the roof. They all froze, eyes wide with terror. The sound came again, followed by a series of scraping noises. The creature, the Wendigo, had found them. Sarah, fueled by a primal urge to survive, devised a desperate plan. Using an old log and a discarded ski pole, they fashioned a makeshift weapon. Ben, despite his injury, volunteered to stand guard at the lone window. The assault came with bone-chilling ferocity. The cabin shuddered as the creature slammed its massive body against the rickety door. They huddled together, bracing themselves against the onslaught. The makeshift weapon felt flimsy against such a monstrous force. Just as despair threatened to consume them, the cabin suddenly stilled. An eerie silence descended. Had the Wendigo given up? Relief battled with lingering fear as they dared a nervous glance toward the window. A horrifying sight met their eyes. A monstrous, skeletal creature, its eyes glowing with an unnatural hunger, peered through the broken window. Its emaciated form belied its immense strength. The stench of decay filled the cabin, making them gag. In a desperate act of survival, Sarah hurled the oil lamp at the creature. It smashed onto the Wendigo's face, igniting its fur. The beast shrieked in fury and recoiled from the flames. This was their chance. With a burst of adrenaline, they flung open the cabin door and sprinted into the night. The Wendigo, momentarily stunned, gave chase. Frantic and disoriented, they plunged deeper into the whisperwood. Exhausted and injured, they stumbled blindly through the snow, the monstrous howls echoing behind them. As dawn painted the horizon with streaks of pale light, hope flickered within them. They emerged from the forest, collapsing onto the familiar path leading back to the lodge. The sight of the distant lights filled them with an overwhelming sense of relief. They made it back, forever scarred by the encounter. The Wendigo remained a chilling memory, a reminder of the night they stared into the face of unspeakable hunger. Back at the lodge, news of their encounter spread like wildfire. The staff, relieved they were alive, confirmed their worst fears. The creature they met was indeed a Wendigo, driven by an insatiable hunger for human flesh. Silas, the old lodge worker, revealed a grim truth. Years ago, a harsh winter had trapped a group of hunters in the forest. One by one, they succumbed to starvation, and in their desperation, one of them turned to a forbidden ritual, appeasing the Wendigo with a sacrifice. The curse, however, didn't end there. It festered, waiting for the next opportunity to claim another victim. Despite their ordeal, the friends couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Their brush with the Wendigo had awakened a primal fear within them. Leaving White Peak became an urgent necessity. Their departure, however, wasn't without consequence. As they loaded their car and prepared to leave, Matt, the most susceptible to fear, began exhibiting strange behavior. His eyes shimmered with an unsettling hunger, and his movements became jerky and predatory. Panic seized them. Matt, they realized with a sickening dread, was succumbing to the Wendigo's curse. The creature, during their encounter, must have inflicted some unseen, insidious touch. A desperate struggle ensued. Sarah, Ben, and Emily, united by their will to survive, managed to subdue Matt and tie him up. They knew taking him back to civilization was too risky. With a heavy heart, they were forced to leave him at the lodge, pleading with Silas to help. The drive home was shrouded in a heavy silence. The once joyous tradition of their ski trip was forever tainted. They had escaped the Wendigo's clutches, but the experience had left an indelible mark on their souls. The question that haunted them most, would Matt succumb to the curse, or would Silas succeed in finding a way to break it? Or had they left their friend to become another horrifying legend whispered in the chilling winds of Whisperwood Forest? David, a solitary figure etched against the stark Alaskan winter, reveled in his self-reliance. Every gust of wind, every groan of the ice-laden trees, was a challenge he relished. This year, however, the challenge morphed into something more sinister. The usual abundance of wildlife had dwindled, replaced by an unsettling silence. David, a survivalist to the core, had prepared meticulously for the harsh winter. Yet, a gnawing emptiness gnawed at him, a hunger that transcended the need for mere sustenance. It was a primal craving, a darkness whispering promises in the howling wind. Days bled into weeks. His meticulously stockpiled food dwindled with alarming speed. The isolation began to twist his once sharp mind. Shadows seemed to writhe, morphing into menacing figures with glowing eyes. Sleep became a torment filled with vivid dreams of stalking creatures and a hunger that mirrored his own. One particularly desolate morning, desperation gnawed at David. He stumbled upon an abandoned cabin, a glimmer of hope in the vast white expanse. Inside, the air hung heavy with dust and the stench of decay. On a table, a tattered journal lay open, its faded script speaking of a past inhabitant, a man driven mad by the relentless winter and an insatiable hunger. The words chilled David. He slammed the book shut, the horror of the past resident a grim reflection of his own deteriorating state. Panic clawed at him. He had become what he'd read about, a predator driven by a hunger that transcended the need for food. Desperation gnawed at him. Venturing out, he searched relentlessly for game, anything to satiate the primal craving. The once pristine white landscape now seemed to mock him, devoid of life. As dusk settled, a low growl pierced the stillness. It wasn't the guttural roar of a bear, nor the territorial snap of a wolf. This growl held a chilling, inhuman quality that sent shivers down David's spine. He followed the sound, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. There, bathed in the pale moonlight, stood a monstrous figure, its emaciated frame barely concealed by tattered clothes. Its eyes burned with an unnatural hunger, a hunger that mirrored David's own. The Wendigo, the embodiment of his own cravings, had come for him. The fight that ensued was a brutal dance of desperation. David, fueled by a primal hunger and a twisted sense of self-preservation, fought with a ferocity that shocked even the monstrous creature. But the Wendigo was ancient, its hunger honed by countless winters. In a moment of horrifying clarity, David realized he wasn't fighting the creature, he was fighting himself. The lines between man and monster had blurred. He had become the very thing he feared. With a surge of revulsion, David stumbled back, the taste of iron metallic on his tongue. The Wendigo, sensing his hesitation, lunged. But David, fueled by a flicker of his humanity, dodged the attack. Grasping a shard of ice, he plunged it into the creature's skeletal chest. The Wendigo shrieked, a sound that echoed through the desolate landscape, before dissolving into a cloud of dark mist. Exhausted and bloodied, David collapsed in the snow. The hunger remained, a dull ache, but it was different now. It was a constant reminder of the darkness he had stared into, the darkness that still lurked within him. He dragged himself back to his cabin, a changed man. The isolation remained, the winter stretched on, but David was no longer alone. He carried the constant battle against the darkness within him, a chilling reminder of the hunger that blurred the lines between man and Wendigo. The flickering campfire cast grotesque shadows on the faces of the 4 teenagers huddled around it. Laughter, laced with nervous tension, echoed through the crisp night air of the black pine woods. Sarah, the ringleader, tossed another log onto the flames, its crackle momentarily silencing their excited chatter. "Are you sure about this, Sarah?" whispered Emily, her voice barely a tremor. "That story about the Wendigo, it's just a creepy legend, right?" Sarah, Eva the braggart, scoffed. "Local folklore, Em. Nothing to worry about. Besides, if we follow the ritual perfectly, the Wendigo will leave us alone, maybe even grant us a wish." The legend they were attempting to exploit spoke of a ritual, an offering of raw flesh and a chant recited under a full moon meant to appease the Wendigo, a monstrous creature said to roam the woods, driven by an insatiable hunger for human flesh. Mark, the resident skeptic, rolled his eyes. "This is stupid. We're messing with forces we don't understand." His voice, however, lacked conviction, his bravado masking a growing unease. John, the quiet one of the group, simply stared into the flames, a flicker of apprehension in his usually stoic eyes. He remembered his grandmother's hushed warnings about the Wendigo, a chilling counterpoint to Sarah's cavalier attitude. Ignoring their doubts, Sarah produced a stolen slab of raw meat, its putrid smell filling the air. Following the fragmented instructions gleaned from dusty library archives, they placed the offering on a makeshift altar of stones. As the full moon emerged from behind a veil of clouds, bathing the clearing in an eerie glow, Sarah began to chant the archaic words, her voice trembling slightly despite her bravado. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the usual symphony of nocturnal creatures replaced by an unsettling silence. An inexplicable chill pierced the air, goosebumps erupting on their exposed skin. Then, a sound. A low growl, distant at first, but growing steadily closer. Panic seized them. They stumbled back, knocking over the offering in their haste. The raw meat tumbled into the fire, sending up a plume of acrid smoke. Sarah choked on her chant, her eyes wide with terror. The growl morphed into a blood-curdling shriek that tore through the stillness. A hulking figure emerged from the darkness, its emaciated frame barely concealed by tattered rags. Glowing eyes, filled with an unnatural hunger, fixated on them. The Wendigo, a monstrous embodiment of their reckless folly, had been awakened. They scattered, the Wendigos in human speed making escape a futile effort. One by one, their screams echoed through the night, a horrifying symphony of their demise. Only John, fueled by a primal terror and his grandmother's whispered warnings, managed to evade the creature's grasp. He stumbled out of the woods, a broken shell of his former self. The taste of fear lingered on his tongue, a chilling reminder of the night they unleashed a horror they could not contain. News of their disappearance spread like wildfire, a grim testament to the consequences of their foolish ritual. John, haunted by the memory of the Wendigo and the screams of his friends, became a recluse. The black pine woods remained a silent monument to their arrogance, a chilling reminder that some legends are best left undisturbed. The ritual, a desperate attempt to appease the Wendigo, had backfired spectacularly, unleashing a horror that forever tainted the once peaceful woods. For 40 winters, Elias had thrived in the rugged solitude of the Northwoods. Each creak of a branch, each howl of a wolf, was a familiar language spoken by his home. But this winter, an unsettling silence had replaced the comforting rhythms of the wild. The game had vanished, replaced by a gnawing unease that gnawed at Elias's withered heart. The first sign came weeks ago, a half-eaten rabbit carcass found abandoned near his trapline. The clean, surgical cuts spoke of a predator unlike any Elias had encountered. Then came the sounds, unearthly howls that sent shivers down his spine, unlike anything he had ever heard in his long life. The nights were the worst. Sleep became a torment filled with vivid dreams of skeletal figures with eyes that burned with unnatural hunger. Whispers, carried on the frigid wind, spoke of a creature from their darkest legends, the Wendigo, a monstrous embodiment of winter's hunger. Elias scoffed at the notion at first. Legends were campfire stories meant to scare children, not seasoned trappers like himself. Yet, the unease gnawed at him, fueled by the unsettling events unfolding around him. One morning, following a trail of disturbed snow, Elias stumbled upon a horrifying discovery. A mangled trapper's shack, its occupant missing. The stench of death hung heavy in the air, a grim confirmation of the whispers that haunted his dreams. Panic, a cold serpent coiling in his gut, threatened to consume him. Yet, a fierce pride, forged in the crucible of the Northwoods, wouldn't allow him to cower. He wouldn't let some myth, some legend, drive him from his home. He would face it, whatever it was. Days blurred into a relentless hunt. Elias set traps, not for fur-bearing creatures, but for the Wendigo itself. He fortified his cabin, carving crude words against evil from the stories his grandmother used to tell him, stories he once considered mere superstition. One frigid night, the wind howled like a banshee, rattling the cabin walls. A guttural growl pierced the storm, sending chills down Elias's spine. He peered through a crack in the boarded windows, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. There, bathed in the pale moonlight, stood a monstrous figure. Its emaciated frame was draped in tattered clothes, its eyes glowing with an unnatural hunger. The Wendigo. The creature of legend was real. Fear threatened to cripple him, but a fierce defiance roared to life within Elias. He wasn't some scared child anymore. He was a man of the Northwoods, and he wouldn't go down without a fight. Grasping a flaming torch, Elias threw open the cabin door. The Wendigo recoiled from the sudden light and heat. With a guttural roar, it charged. The fight was a brutal dance of desperation and survival. Elias, fueled by a lifetime of battling the harsh wilderness, fought with a ferocity that surprised even himself. The battle raged through the night. The cabin creaked in protest, threatened to crumble under the weight of the struggle. Just as Elias felt his strength failing, he saw an opportunity. With a surge of adrenaline, he thrust the flaming torch at the creature's exposed chest. The Wendigo shrieked, a sound that echoed through the woods, before dissolving into a cloud of dark mist that dissipated into the night. Exhausted and battered, Elias collapsed onto the snow-covered floor. The Wendigo was gone, for now. But Elias knew the creature's hunger was insatiable. It would return. He would have to be ready. As dawn painted the horizon with streaks of pale light, Elias stared out at the vast wilderness, his weathered face etched with grim determination. He was no longer just a trapper. He was a guardian, the last line of defense against a creature of legend, a reminder that sometimes the things that go bump in the night are all too real. A cacophony of static filled the observation room as Dr. Evelyn Wright fiddled with the dials. Frustration gnawed at her. Weeks into their Arctic research expedition, their attempts to pick up any meaningful radio signals had been met with nothing but the monotonous hiss of the frozen wasteland. Suddenly, a faint crackle pierced the static, followed by a distorted human voice. Evelyn leaned closer, adrenaline jolting her awake. The voice, weak and laced with terror, spoke of a monstrous creature, a Wendigo, relentless in its hunt. "Help, lost, cabin, creature." The voice sputtered, punctuated by bursts of static. Evelyn slammed her fist on the table, the urgency of the plea sending shivers down her spine. Wendigo? It was a myth, a campfire story whispered amongst the Inuit. But the raw terror in the voice held an undeniable truth. She shared the recording with her team, a seasoned geologist, Dr. Mark Davies, and a stoic Inuit guide, Kaya. Mark scoffed, dismissing it as a malfunction or a hoax. Kaya, however, listened with a grim expression, a flicker of recognition in her dark eyes. The Wendigo, she spoke, her voice low and reverent. A creature of legend, driven by an insatiable hunger for human flesh. They say it roams the coldest regions, a twisted embodiment of winter's wrath. Evelyn, a scientist at heart, struggled to reconcile the chilling legend with the desperate plea for help. But the urgency in the voice, the raw terror, couldn't be ignored. Ignoring Mark's protests, she convinced him to authorize a search and rescue mission based on the faint, distorted signal. Their journey was fraught with peril. Blistering winds howled, threatening to tear their flimsy shelters apart. The unforgiving terrain challenged their every step. Kaya, however, led them with an unnerving certainty, her eyes scanning the desolate landscape for any sign of the missing person. Days bled into a nightmarish blur. The distorted signal grew weaker, the hope of finding the source fading with each passing hour. Just as despair threatened to consume them, Kaya pointed to a distant speck on the horizon, a barely visible cabin, half buried in a snowdrift. They approached cautiously, a tense silence hanging heavy in the air. The cabin door hung ajar, a single bloody boot abandoned on the porch steps. Inside, the scene was one of horrific chaos, overturned furniture, torn clothes, and a chilling emptiness that spoke of a desperate struggle. No sign of the transmitter, no sign of the person who called for help. Just a chilling silence that confirmed their worst fears. The Wendigo, it seemed, had claimed another victim. As they retreated from the desolate cabin, a low growl echoed through the frozen landscape. It wasn't the guttural roar of a bear, nor the territorial snap of a wolf. This growl held a chilling, inhuman quality that sent shivers down their spines. Kaya, her face etched with a grim determination, led them back towards their base camp. The Wendigo, she explained, was a cunning creature, often luring victims back with false hope. But Evelyn, shaken yet resolute, refused to leave empty-handed. Back at the research station, she analyzed the distorted recording, a desperate plea etched into the very fabric of the static. With newfound purpose, she began researching the Wendigo legend, obscure texts, forgotten folktales. Somewhere within those stories, she believed, lay the key to defeating the creature, the only way to ensure their survival and prevent the Wendigo's hunger from claiming more lives. The Arctic wind continued to howl, a constant reminder of the chilling encounter. The radio signal remained a haunting echo, a testament to a lost life. But within the confines of the research station, a new battle had begun, a battle between science and myth, between hope and the insatiable hunger of the Wendigo. Cameron Pierce, a jaded journalist with a nose for debunking urban legends, scoffed at the whispers of the Wendigo. Sent to a remote Canadian town nestled at the edge of the unforgiving Whisperwood Forest, he was there for one reason, to expose the myth as nothing more than a campfire story used to scare children. The townsfolk, a hardy bunch with withered faces and guarded smiles, spoke of the Wendigo in hushed tones. They warned Cameron of the creature's insatiable hunger, its chilling howls that echoed through the dense woods at night. But Cameron, armed with his skepticism and a healthy dose of bravado, dismissed their warnings as superstition. He spent his days interviewing locals, their stories riddled with inconsistencies. The Wendigo, according to their accounts, could be a towering monstrosity or a skeletal figure cloaked in shadows. The descriptions conflicted, fueling Cameron's belief that the entire thing was a collective delusion. One evening, at a local tavern, he met Silas, a wizened old trapper with eyes that held a lifetime of stories. Silas spoke of the Wendigo in a way that sent shivers down Cameron's spine, a chilling conviction that transcended mere superstition. He spoke of a darkness that clung to the forest, a hunger that twisted men's souls. Intrigued, Cameron convinced Silas to be his guide into the Whisperwood, determined to find evidence that would debunk the myth once and for all. The forest was a living entity, sunlight struggling to penetrate the dense canopy. An unsettling silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig or the rustle of unseen creatures. Days turned into a grueling trek. The air grew colder, and a strange unease gnawed at Cameron. Even Silas, usually stoic, seemed to move with a newfound caution. One night, huddled around a crackling campfire, they heard it, a low, guttural growl that echoed through the trees, sending shivers down their spines. The growl came closer, filled with an unnatural hunger that defied explanation. Fear, raw and primal, surged through Cameron. He had scoffed at the stories, but the sound resonated with a terrifying truth. They scrambled to their feet, desperately trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. A hulking figure emerged from the darkness, its emaciated frame barely concealed by tattered clothes. Its eyes, glowing with an unholy hunger, fixed on them. The Wendigo. Cameron, his bravado shattered, stared in horror as the creature lunged. Silas, with surprising agility, shoved Cameron aside, a guttural yell escaping his lips. The Wendigo turned its attention to the old trapper, a monstrous battle ensuing in the flickering firelight. Cameron, frozen in terror, watched as Silas fought with a desperation born of years spent living in the shadow of the Wendigo. But the creature was relentless, its strength inhuman. With a sickening crunch, the fight came to an abrupt end. The Wendigo turned its glowing eyes back on Cameron, a terrifying predator stalking its prey. In that moment, all his skepticism vanished, replaced by a primal fear for his life. He stumbled back, adrenaline propelling him through the dense undergrowth. He ran blindly, the chilling growls echoing behind him. Exhausted and disoriented, he emerged from the forest, collapsing onto the familiar dirt road that led back to the town. Safe, but forever changed, Cameron returned to the city. He wrote his story, not an exposé, but a chilling account of his encounter with the Wendigo. The story sparked debate, but for Cameron, the myth was no longer a question. He had stared into the face of the Wendigo, and the memory of its glowing eyes and insatiable hunger served as a constant reminder some legends are best left undisturbed. The musty attic air hung heavy with the weight of forgotten memories. Sarah, her brother Daniel close behind, sifted through dusty trunks and chipped wooden boxes. Their grandfather, a stoic man of the mountain wilderness, had recently passed, leaving behind a cryptic note urging them to confront the truth. Unearthing a weathered leather-bound journal, Sarah blew away the dust. The faded script, penned in their grandfather's hand, spoke of a harrowing winter decades ago, a time when his hunting party became lost in the unforgiving embrace of the White Peak Mountains. The journal detailed their dwindling supplies, the gnawing hunger that gnawed at their bellies, and finally, the discovery of a hidden cave. Inside, they found a chilling sight, a grotesque effigy, its skeletal form draped in animal skins. Fearful whispers of the Wendigo, a monstrous creature driven by an insatiable hunger, filled the air. Desperate to survive, they performed a forbidden ritual, an offering of flesh meant to appease the beast. But the ritual backfired. One by one, their companions succumbed to a strange illness, their eyes growing vacant, their hunger morphing into something monstrous. Only their grandfather escaped, forever haunted by the encounter. A chill ran down Sarah's spine as she slammed the journal shut. The truth was far more horrifying than they ever imagined. The Wendigo, it seemed, wasn't just a legend, it was a curse passed down through generations. Their newfound knowledge fueled a gnawing unease. They started noticing changes in themselves, an intolerance for the cold, a heightened sense of smell, an unsettling hunger that no amount of food could satiate. One evening, during a fierce blizzard, the power went out. The darkness, punctuated only by the howling wind, amplified their anxieties. Then, a sound pierced the silence, a low, guttural growl resonating from deep within the woods surrounding their cabin. Terror seized them. They knew the Wendigo had come, drawn to the curse festering within them. Panicked, they barricaded themselves inside, the flimsy wooden door a meager defense against the monstrous hunger lurking outside. As the night wore on, the growls grew louder, accompanied by the scraping of claws against the walls. The hunger gnawed at them from within, a constant battle against the monstrous urges threatening to consume them. Suddenly, a memory surfaced from their grandfather's journal. The ritual, though meant as an offering, had inadvertently weakened the Wendigo. They needed to replicate it, not with flesh, but with an act of selflessness, a rejection of the very hunger the creature thrived on. With a heavy heart, Sarah and Daniel shared the last remaining food they had, a meager offering pushed through a crack beneath the door. The growls faltered, replaced by an unsettling silence. Dawn painted the sky with streaks of light, and with it, a glimmer of hope. Exhausted but resolute, they emerged from the cabin. The creature was gone, but the struggle was far from over. The curse, a constant reminder of their ancestors' folly, lingered. They knew they had to find a way to break the bond, to prevent the Wendigo from claiming them once again. Their journey had just begun, a race against time to break the generational curse and overcome the insatiable hunger that threatened to consume not just them, but their very humanity. The Wendigo, a terrifying entity born out of desperation, loomed over them, a constant reminder of the darkness that resided within. Harmony Falls had always prided itself on its sleepy charm. But the charm began to curdle with unease on the crisp autumn day. Mrs. Peabody simply vanished. One moment she was watering her prize-winning petunias, the next, only her empty rocking chair creaked on the porch. The sheriff, a kind but aging man named Hank, dismissed it as an unfortunate senior moment. But when Mr. Crowley, the gruff but harmless bookstore owner, disappeared a week later, a wave of icy dread washed over the town. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, just a sudden, unsettling absence. Days bled into weeks, and the disappearances continued. Mrs. Hernandez, the baker with a heart of gold, then young Tommy Miller, known for his freckled smile and boundless energy. Each time, a chilling emptiness settled where their lives had once brimmed. Fear, a silent predator, stalked the streets. People stopped leaving their houses after dark, children huddled indoors, their laughter replaced by worried whispers. Sheriff Hank, his face etched with worry lines deeper than any crow's foot, felt the weight of the town's fear press down on him. His investigation yielded nothing, no clues, no witnesses, just a void where a life once was. There were rumors, of course. Whispers of strange lights in the night, of hushed conversations in a language that chilled the soul. But they were just that, whispers, dismissed as the desperate grasping of a terrified community. One evening, Sarah, a sharp-witted college student visiting her grandparents, overheard a conversation between her usually jovial grandfather and a gaunt, pale stranger. They spoke of a harvest, of a need to replenish, their voices laced with a disturbing reverence. Curiosity, laced with a healthy dose of fear, propelled Sarah to investigate. Following cryptic clues gleaned from dusty library archives and hushed conversations with town elders, she stumbled upon a hidden cellar beneath the seemingly abandoned church on the outskirts of town. The cellar reeked of a cold, metallic tang. Sarah, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs, found an array of strange pods, bulbous, fleshy things humming with an eerie green glow. In one, she saw a face, a contorted mask of fear and confusion, Mrs. Peabody. Just then, the stranger from her grandparents' conversation entered the cellar. He introduced himself as Elias, a member of a secretive group called the Harvesters. They believed in a form of immortality, one achieved through transferring consciousness into these fleshy pods. Sarah, filled with a righteous fury, confronted Elias about the disappearances. He explained that they only took those nearing the end of their natural life, offering them a chance at a prolonged existence. Sarah saw right through his twisted logic. It wasn't a choice, it was a theft, a violation of humanity. A struggle ensued, Sarah's desperation fueled by a fierce desire to protect her town. In the chaos, a pod ruptured, spewing out glowing green mist. Elias shrieked, his form dissolving as it was absorbed by the mist. Sarah managed to escape the collapsing cellar, the horrifying truth etched into her mind. She raced back to town, determined to warn everyone. The disappearances weren't ghosts or monsters, they were the harvesters, snatching souls from their bodies in the name of a twisted form of immortality. Her warnings, initially met with disbelief, gained traction as the chilling truth sunk in. Sheriff Hank, his eyes filled with a newfound resolve, rallied the town. Together, they devised a plan to expose the harvesters and free those trapped within the pods. It wasn't an easy fight. Men and women, once consumed by fear, rediscovered their courage. They stormed the abandoned church, a united force against the unseen enemy. The harvesters, caught off guard by the town's resistance, were apprehended or fled in terror. The rescued townsfolk, weak and disoriented, emerged from the pods, blinking in the sunlight. Harmony Falls, once shrouded in fear, was abuzz with a different kind of energy, the energy of a community that had faced its nightmare and emerged stronger. The scars of the disappearances remained, a chilling reminder of the nightmarish truth that lurked beneath the surface. But the town had awoken, a shield against the darkness that sought to extinguish their light. The body snatchers were gone, but the fight for their humanity, for their town's soul, had just begun. John shouldered his worn backpack, the weight of familiar comfort against the desolate Alaskan landscape. Each creaking step deeper into the whispering pines was a step further away from the life he desperately sought to outrun. Betrayal, loss, the crushing weight of guilt, the city held only ghosts for him now. The wilderness, however, held a different kind of memory. John had spent his childhood summers here with his grandfather, a seasoned woodsman who instilled in him a deep respect for nature's raw power. Here, amidst the towering pines and snow-capped peaks, John hoped to find solace, a chance to rebuild himself from the ashes. The first few weeks were idyllic. John embraced the solitude, the rhythmic crunch of fresh snow under his boots, the symphony of birdsong. He reveled in the simple act of survival, chopping wood, foraging for berries, building a crackling fire each night against the encroaching darkness. Then, the dreams began. Vivid nightmares filled with skeletal figures with glowing eyes, their guttural growls echoing in the vast emptiness of his dreamscape. He'd wake up in a cold sweat, the silence of the cabin pressing down on him like a physical weight. One particularly frigid morning, while setting a trapline, John stumbled upon a gruesome scene. A half-eaten rabbit carcass lay discarded, its bones picked clean with a surgical precision that sent shivers down his spine. The legend of the Wendigo, a monstrous creature driven by an insatiable hunger for human flesh, a creature his grandfather used to tell cautionary tales about, resurfaced in his mind. Dismissing it as a mere coincidence, a trick of the isolated mind, John pressed on. But the unsettling events continued. Strange symbols carved into ancient trees, an unsettling feeling of being watched, the ever-present growls that seemed to emanate from the dense wilderness. His once peaceful solitude morphed into a suffocating paranoia. The isolation began to gnaw at him, twisting his thoughts into a tangled mess. He started seeing figures lurking in the shadows, his once healthy hunger morphing into something raw and primal. One moonlit night, the hunger roared to life. A maddening craving for raw meat overwhelmed him. Driven by a compulsion he couldn't fight, John attacked his own traps, devouring the flesh with a feral intensity that terrified him. As the taste of blood lingered on his tongue, a chilling realization dawned on him. The Wendigo, the creature of legend, wasn't just some myth. It was a primal hunger, an embodiment of winter's desperation, and it was resonating within him. John, his face contorted in a mixture of fear and horror, stared at the reflection of his blood-stained face in a frozen pond. The man staring back was barely recognizable, wild-eyed, gaunt, driven by a monstrous hunger. The line between man and monster had blurred. The wilderness, he realized with a horrifying clarity, wasn't offering him solace. It was amplifying the darkness that festered within him. With a newfound desperation, John knew he had a choice to make: succumb to the hunger and become the very monster he feared, or fight back against the darkness that threatened to consume him. The call of the wild had taken on a terrifying new meaning, and John's battle for his humanity had just begun. For generations, the residents of Blackwater Creek had lived in a delicate harmony with the unforgiving wilderness. Winter, however, was a harsh mistress. This year, the thaw was particularly slow, the icy grip clinging to the land with an unnatural tenacity. Old Man Henry, a weathered storyteller with eyes that held the memory of countless winters, fidgeted with his rocking chair. The unnatural delay gnawed at him, stirring a deep unease that he couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just the inconvenience of a prolonged winter, it was a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, a feeling that something terrible lay hidden beneath the melting snow. Then, whispers began to circulate. A trapper stumbled upon a mangled carcass, picked clean with a gruesome precision. Days later, a young boy, playing near a partially thawed stream, stumbled upon a bone, a human femur, bleached and weathered, yet unmistakably human. Fear, a silent predator, stalked the usually jovial town square. The stories of the Wendigo, a monstrous creature driven by an insatiable hunger for human flesh, a creature dismissed as campfire folklore, resurfaced with a chilling realism. Sheriff Martha Jones, a stoic woman who had seen her share of winter hardships, knew they couldn't ignore the growing unease. Leading a search party, they ventured into the now soggy woods, the silence broken only by the dripping of melting snow and the squelch of their boots. The discovery they made sent shivers down their spines. A hidden cave, partially revealed by the receding snowdrift, held a macabre collection, bones scattered across the cold stone floor, crude symbols painted on the damp walls, an unsettling testament to a dark ritual. Old Man Henry, accompanying the search party, recognized the symbols from his grandfather's forbidden tales, a summoning ritual for the Wendigo. The realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. The delayed thaw, the unsettling silence, the gnawing unease, it was all a consequence of their unwitting ancestors' folly. News of the discovery spread like wildfire through Blackwater Creek. Panic threatened to engulf the town, but Sheriff Jones, fueled by a quiet determination, rallied the community. They wouldn't succumb to fear, they would face the darkness head-on. Drawing on his grandfather's stories and the forgotten knowledge passed down through generations, Old Man Henry helped them decipher the symbols, uncovering the ritual's weakness, a rejection of the very hunger it fueled. As the final vestiges of snow melted, revealing a landscape tinged with the pale green of new life, a tense calm settled over Blackwater Creek. They prepared a makeshift offering, not flesh, but a symbol of selflessness, food gathered from their meager stores, placed near the cave entrance. The ritual, a desperate act of defiance, was conducted under the watchful gaze of the entire community. A collective breath was held as they awaited a response. Silence stretched into what felt like an eternity. Then, a gust of frigid wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it a low, mournful howl that echoed through the thawing forest. The wind died down as quickly as it rose. The oppressive silence lifted, replaced by the chirping of birds and the gentle murmur of running water. The Wendigo, its hunger momentarily appeased, had retreated. The threat hadn't vanished entirely. The past, like the bones scattered in the cave, served as a chilling reminder. But the community of Blackwater Creek, forever marked by the encounter, had emerged stronger. They had faced the darkness and survived. Now, they had to rebuild, not just their homes, but the delicate balance with the wild that had been so tragically disrupted. The thaw, a symbol of new beginnings, held a new meaning for Blackwater Creek, a chance to heal, to remember, and to ensure that the secrets of the Wendigo remained buried, not with the melting snow, but with the mistakes of the past. The air hung heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth as Sarah adjusted the straps of her backpack. Beside her, her friends, Liam and Emily, exchanged excited glances, a weekend backpacking trip in the remote Blackwood forest, a chance to escape the city's suffocating grip. Their initial exuberance waned as the afternoon sun dipped below the dense canopy, casting long shadows that danced menacingly between the ancient trees. The trail they'd been following seemed to vanish into a tangled mess of undergrowth. Panic gnawed at Sarah's gut. Liam, ever the optimist, dismissed her concerns, while Emily, the pragmatist, suggested retracing their steps. But the sun was sinking fast, and the forest seemed to be closing in on them, whispering secrets carried on the chilling breeze. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. They all stopped, a tense silence settling around them. Then it came again, a faint, disembodied whisper, barely a word, more of a chilling hiss that seemed to slither through the trees. It came again, closer this time, a single word, lost. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. It wasn't the wind, it was something else, something that played on their deepest fears. Lost. The word echoed in their minds, playing on their growing desperation. They stumbled on, the whispers multiplying, weaving a terrifying tapestry of fear. "Come this way," one hissed. "Here," another beckoned. "Help is near," a third lied. The whispers played with their sense of direction, leading them deeper into the heart of the forest. By nightfall, they were hopelessly lost, exhaustion gnawing at their bodies. Huddled together for warmth, they tried to ignore the whispers that now seemed to surround them, a chorus of disembodied voices playing on their worst nightmares. Liam, cracking under the strain, insisted on following the help whispers. Sarah and Emily, terrified yet resolute, refused. The whispers, sensing their resistance, turned menacing. They spoke of hunger, of darkness, of a creature with eyes that burned like embers. Suddenly, a twig snapped in the distance. A hulking figure emerged from the shadows, its skeletal frame barely concealed by tattered rags. Its eyes, glowing with an unnatural hunger, fixed on them. The Wendigo. Terror stripped them of their remaining rationality. Liam, driven by the promises of the whispers, bolted towards the creature. Sarah and Emily cried out after him, their voices swallowed by the oppressive silence that descended as the Wendigo lunged. A blood-curdling scream pierced the night, a horrifying confirmation of Liam's fate. Tears streamed down Sarah and Emily's faces, but despair was a luxury they couldn't afford. Fueled by a desperate need to survive, they remembered warnings whispered by their grandparents about the Wendigo: fire wards off its hunger. Scrambling for their lighters, they set fire to a pile of dead leaves. The flames, small at first, flickered against the encroaching darkness. The Wendigo recoiled, its hunger warring with its fear of the flames. Taking advantage of the creature's hesitation, Sarah and Emily ran. They ran blindly, the whispers chasing them, the chilling image of the glowing eyes forever etched in their memories. They ran until they stumbled upon a familiar trail, the faint glow of distant civilization, a beacon of hope. They stumbled back into town, ragged and traumatized, their story met with disbelief and hushed whispers of the Wendigo's legend. But for Sarah and Emily, the whispers were no longer figments of their imagination. They were a chilling reminder of their encounter with the creature, a testament to the horrors that lurked in the heart of Blackwood Forest. They carried the scars of their experience, both physical and mental. The whispers, though silenced for now, would continue to echo in their nightmares, a constant reminder of the Wendigo's domain, a place where hope was a fading ember and fear-filled whispers lured the unwary to their doom.